everyone. Welcome to the NOVAsia podcast. Today we're discussing neutrality. And I was kind of interested in the subject because recently Switzerland, who's famous for being neutral no matter the topic, decided to place sanctions against Russia due to their invasion of the Ukraine. And it got me thinking about, is it possible to be truly neutral, or do sometimes you need to take a stand? And so I've brought my friends here today to discuss. First, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. Do you want to go first?
Okay. Then I'll start. Hi, my name is Imme. I'm from the Netherlands, and I'm interested in the topic of news neutrality because during my bachelor's, actually, I followed a lot of courses regarding this topic, such as framing in the media, and really doing a deep dive into also how influencers really influence the opinion of a lot of the public. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Via and I come from Taiwan. I'm interested in this topic because I always wanted Taiwan to be a neutral country, but we can't, so Switzerland become my favorite country. Yeah.
And I should say that I'm Tara, and I'm from the United States, and my major in undergrad was mass communications. So I've just been studying neutrality for a long time, and Emma sort of brought it up already, but we're definitely going to be discussing the news and also influencers, because I think a lot of people are getting their information from influencers these days. So I want to make sure we're talking about both. But that being said, I wanted to first ask you guys, where do you get your news coverage first and foremost? Like, where are you learning about current events?
Mostly it's from BBC. I downloaded the BBC app and I think I watch news most from internet.
For me, of course, I have a few news sources. So back from the Netherlands, as well as a Korean news source, since we're here in Korea right now, and a few international ones. But I am also guilty of following a few news YouTubers like Philip DeFranco, who explain the news as well. And sometimes I stay up to date through TikTok, and then of course double check it online. But yeah, I am guilty of also getting it on the internet.
It's really interesting you brought up Philip DeFranco, because I also watch Philip DeFranco, and I also get a lot of my information from the news, like online, but sometimes I watch it on TV at home. Now that I'm in Korea, it's definitely all online. My favorite papers are the Korean Times and the Japanese Times. Um, but I think all of us, no matter what, are sort of forced to get news from the internet. Like, how often do you think you see headlines on your TikTok feeds, on your Twitter feeds? Like, how often do you think you're seeing that?
Well, I spend quite a bit of time on TikTok, so probably quite a bit. It also, of course, depends on how the algorithm is filtered, on what you like to follow. But the TikTok algorithm has caught on that I at least like to be updated on some news, especially around climate change and things like that. So that I will definitely see at least a few times a day.
Yeah, I spend most of my time on Instagram, so I also follow some accounts they collect news for this week, and they will write their outline for this news. So that's mostly how I get news.
Yeah, sometimes you're like, I feel like these days you're forced to read headlines over articles sometimes, just because how pervasive it is when you're just scrolling Instagram, like you said, or TikTok, like you said. It's just in your face, even if you prefer some more like credible sources. So the next question I want to ask is, do you think your news has a bias? How would you rank papers, Philip DeFranco, etc., that you're getting your news from?
For me, it's really biased, but I think I'm aware of the fact that it's biased, so I sometimes venture out and also try to get a more unbiased, or at least the other side. But in terms of political stuff, it's very heavily biased for me, and that goes from even like the American elections that I followed multiple times to the Dutch elections, even to the Korean ones here. So for me, it's definitely biased, and I think the algorithms that are in place for social media platforms that we use, they make sure that the news that you're seeing is biased because their ultimate goal is that you stay on their platform as long as possible. So yeah, it's for sure biased for me.
Yeah, I think the same way. And also, when I was in school, my history class also taught us to distinguish like history fact and history explanation. So it makes me aware of that. And I was a journalist in my university, so I think I'm quite aware of it. But yeah, there's a, sure there is a bias.
And I know you mentioned political news as having bias, which I find is extremely biased. But how do you feel about bias in things like for example, in the United States, there was a lot of bias I feel around COVID communications. Depending which channel you were getting your news from, you'd have very different opinions on things like masks and social distancing. It seems like everybody was following the rules to some degree, but there was like a lot of debate over, in that case, scientific facts. So do you find it's just political news that's biased, or are you finding it elsewhere as well?
Everything is biased. I think everything from uh, new games that are coming out to maybe K-pop news to vaccine stuff to climate change. I think everything you see is biased because, and especially because of that course that I followed, framing in the media. Even if the journalist tries to be as objective as possible, one tiny word can throw a reader in a completely different direction. So I think even if you want to be objective, that's not really nowadays. I personally don't believe it's really possible anymore. So I think you find a bias everywhere.
Yeah, I think that journalists always write something they believe, so there's is a bias.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like it it's not just about fact, it's what the journalist themselves believes to be fact. That's really interesting. I like how you put that. I would definitely say the same. Coming from a mass communications background, who like I studied journalism, like you said, one adjective really colors the whole story. We try to omit them as much as possible while we're writing, but sometimes it's just impossible. You throw an adjective in, and a good editor will catch that and cross it out, but it really does change like perception. Um, do you think news should have a bias? Do you think reporters, there's instances where they can have it and it's useful? Or do you think it should always be objective?
I think it's okay for journalists to have their own stance and have their own thinkings, but the point is how much, like the percentage of information and the facts they put in their news. Like they should that the audience knew or the readers knew, okay, this is a fact, and that the news the readers also know this is your argument. Like it's okay to have discussion and to have your own thinkings, but that should be separate from the fact.
I think it highly depends on the topic. So, with COVID, you of course hope that news is going to be as objective as possible. But even somehow, there in most countries, politics got merged into it, which is not the best way to go. I think with elections, it can be beneficial if you have a bias. Because the opponent is going to be super biased anyway. You're trying to fight for, well, presidency or who the next political party in charge is going to be. So I think in those cases it can be useful, but it's like what you said before. It's there's a situation point. If you if you go over that point, I think when you start dabbling into fiction or into things that threaten potential democracy, then I think there's a problem.
I also think it's about the resignation. Like the journalists have their own thinkings, and maybe some people will feel resonate and make them feel the same way. That is one benefit if the journalists have their own thinking in their news.
Traditional journalism believes that we should be as objective as possible, no color, no adjectives, nothing like that. But it seems like what we're reading has a slant. Um, do you think there are any ways that you can kind of cut through the bias? Like, I think Via, you mentioned that like this idea that you can have moments where you're saying, this is my opinion on the subject. It was you, Via.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my opinion on the subject. I'm going to share my opinion now, but first giving all the objective news. I feel like Philip DeFranco, for example, does a really good job of being like, okay, here's the facts. Now here's what I think about it, kind of thing. Do you have any other thoughts about how we could achieve a more objective news sharing?
Let me think
Yeah, that's
more.
fine.
Yeah. Mm,
I definitely think it was a good thought, like having that separation, saying like, okay, here's what actually happened, as little details possible, and then having a commentary section um, while you're thinking. Another thought I had is, for example, my dad loves Fox News, which is, if you don't know, an extremely Republican leaning uh, news sharing channel in the United States. And I think some of the shows actually might have better reporting than its more liberal leaning counterparts. But there's many shows, for example, Tucker Carlson, which is a commentary show. It's not a news show, and I don't think they make it clear at all. So one thought I would have is also being way more upfront about what your purpose is in sharing the news. Like, are you really a reporter, or are you commenting on the news and causing up a stir, sort of thing? Any other thoughts from you two?
I think that's a very good point. I think, yeah, giving that separation or being very clear about what is a fact and what is your commentary would be a very good way to go. Or even in like online news channels, probably not possible, but in an ideal world, it would be great if you have two types of news that can go out. So, indeed, commentaries versus just facts. But that would be very difficult to achieve, I think. But like you said, what Philip DeFranco does is already really good. And I think if other influencers, especially, would join in on that, of like this is the matter of facts. Here's what my thoughts are about it. I think that would probably be the safest way to go.
yeah. Or a combination, like you have to put two stands in your news. So maybe you stand like at A, but you also have to write B to let people know, okay, there are different sides. So maybe it is also a good way.
Yeah, I like the idea of having something that's sort of regulated. I remember on Instagram there used to be a thing where you had to put certain disclosures about advertisements.
Yeah.
I think you're still supposed to use it. I don't know if anyone ever does. So I guess the problem would be like enforcing that sort of structure. But yeah, I think it would be great if we could have something like that. So we talked about the news, but these days, a lot of influencers and celebrities are being asked to give their opinions on certain topics. And I find that often anyone with a platform, even if it's like a craft channel on YouTube or like an Instagram model who has nothing to do with whatever kind of sphere, is being asked to use their platform for political purposes or for social change, for climate change, things like that. Um, and I also see a lot of times, actors, actresses, influencers, they're being asked to talk about a topic that they're not very educated on, and then they put their foot in their mouth. And this might not be the best example, but I was thinking about when all the celebrities sang that song, Imagine, during the beginning of COVID, and they're like trying to do something to help people, but they're often really out of touch. So, do you think, just without the context of people messing up or not being educated, just generally, do you think that people with a platform should use it to advance political, social, and climate change? Do you think that's useful? Or could it be useful?
I think it can be really useful. You have specific creators for that. But I think what a lot of people seem to forget is that if we look at journalists or reporters, these people actually have a skill set of how to communicate the news. A lot of celebrities usually don't, so they're also going to be, like you said already, a lot less educated on the topic. As for, I think social media can be a great place for sharing more knowledge, especially about yeah, social issues or even the Ukraine situation where you see a lot of people coming together and helping, I think it can be really, really good. But I don't think you should demand from your favorite influencer that they should give their stance on a specific topic because maybe they're not sure yet. Maybe they're forming their opinion. So they're just like us. They're also trying to figure out what their stance is, and even if it's a different stance, we shouldn't necessarily scrutinize them for it because everybody, yeah, I think everybody has a right to free speech. So yeah, two sides to it.
Yeah, I believe they should be very cautious on their speaking and on their words because they can influence a lot of people. I think the point is how much information they had or they collect to, I mean, the basement is important because sometimes I see some celebrities have the same thinking as mine. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And their like comment can also be like a discussion platform to bring up the importance of the topic. So I think that's good, but the point is you have to be very cautious and you have to collect much information, enough information. So that would be good. Yeah.
And that brings me to the next question. You guys both kind of touched on it. How knowledgeable should you have to be as an influencer before talking about a subject?
Yeah, that's. Mm, I think you should do your research. That's for sure. If you want to communicate it, if you have a big audience, you should at least do enough research so you know more than what the general human being would know, because then you can actually educate them on it. Um, but even then, what I usually see is that maybe, for example, it's a makeup artist and they're really good at anything and everything about makeup. You shouldn't really ask them to give you skincare advice or to give you advice on who to vote for. It's basically stick to one part where you know a lot of, make sure that what you're teaching other people is correct and or you believe is correct, and then go from there, but don't dabble into what you kind of think or what you kind of know, because that's how you spread a lot of misinformation.
That's kind of a good point. I wouldn't go to even a makeup artist for skincare advice, and those seem pretty linked, but they're really not. So, yeah, it's kind of hard to ask somebody, I think, who, doesn't have any background and say, like, gender sciences about, like, what should we do about the, like, gender wage gap? Like, I don't know. I don't know any better than you do. Like, it's hard to kind of get up here and talk about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they have to give us enough details, or at least they should know the biggest two opinions about this incident, like agree and disagree, why they agree, why they disagree, and why you choose one side to stand. So at least as people know that, okay, you know there are different sides about this incident. You don't have to know every side, but at least the biggest two are important.
Yeah, it's also hard, I think, sometimes. Like, there's some subjects where I think everybody can sort of share an opinion easily. Um, and like you said, there's the whole matter of freedom of speech. Like, you wouldn't want to take away somebody's ability to talk about something even if they're pretty stupid about it. Like, it's their right to be stupid. Sometimes that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like, with some topics, it's like, oh, well, you've gone up and spoken a lot about it, but like, I'm not sure if you really are that educated on the matter. Like, yeah, anyway, very interesting. But the next question I was going to ask is, if an influencer doesn't speak up on a certain topic, do you assume that they have a differing opinion as you or the same opinion as you?
It's a good one. It depends what kind of creator, I would say, because for example, if we're looking at a lot of singers, I don't necessarily assume much about the person. But if it's a person like Philip DeFranco, if he's staying quiet about a specific important topic, then I would usually assume that he's thinking something that most of his audience would not agree with.
Mm.
But this really, again, depends on the type of creator. If it's a makeup artist that doesn't want to comment about the corona situation, that's understandable. I can get that, and there are a lot of creators as well who just want to have their or influencers who want to have their platform just for that one thing they're focusing on. They don't want, for example, Corona to be on there or political issues because they see their tiny social media like platform as a safe space for other people where they go to escape these issues. So it highly depends on the creator.
Yeah, I also believe I don't assume people, but I think it's based on this person's advanced behaviors. Like if this person speak out for so many instances, but this time this person choose to be quiet, then I assume that maybe your opinion is different from the trendy. So yeah, that is why I think it's based on he or her his or her behaviors before. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say, like, if I see someone who, like, I watch a lot of YouTube, so there's some YouTubers where just based on the type of video they make, like if they're the type that like breaks into people's houses as like a prank or something like that, I'm like, oh, you probably have an opinion that I hate about this. But if it's someone I really like, I'm always like assuming the best. I think in K-pop, there's a word for that kind of person, like a Oppa sympathizer. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh no,
No.
I don't.
No, it's like supposed to be your idol can
Mhm.
never do anything wrong. So I'm sort of like this. Like the celebrities I like if Niall Horn killed someone in like cold blood, I would be like that person deserved it. Like, come on. So I think
Understandable.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think with some influencers, I'm just like inclined to believe they agree with me. But I do think that is it just my experience, or do you see like people asking like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, you need to answer, I need to know your opinion on like X social issue. Do you ever see that?
Yeah, I see it quite a bit on TikTok. So especially bigger creators that it's like not the one hit wonders, but basically the ones that have a steady flow of content. Most of them will ask for specific issues, and especially if you see that it's an issue that's very important to them, then they're gonna come back to specific videos or to the creator and ask them for their opinion, because I think it's for a specific part also validation that they want to hear that what they believe is very is valid, that they've yeah, I think that's basically it, actually.
Yeah, I think most cases in Taiwan is also always about like Taiwan and China sovereignty issues. And I'm trying to be neutral now because it's hard for me to answer this question. Like, do I want Taiwanese artists to answer questions about that, or do they have to show their loyalty? That is hard. So I understand why they choose to be quiet. Yeah, because it's about their personal benefit, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I remember when Mulan came out, the live action version, and a lot of the Chinese actors and actresses in that movie, I can only think of two, but I said a lot still. Um, they came out with like pro China opinions on the matter of like China versus Hong Kong, and it caused like a lot of backlash. I even remember like companies were facing backlash. Like I think Apple or Google did something that made it harder for protesters to get together in Hong Kong. And they were facing backlash on like not announcing a political stance on that, even though they're based in another country and maybe don't really have anything to do with that sort of debate. But people like really expect even companies to have kind of an opinion. The other thing I was thinking about is there's a creator on TikTok, Brittany Broski. She's a comedy account where most of the time she's in a muumuu and talking in a British accent. But people really expect her to like talk about, for example, like she was asked multiple times to talk about the 2020 elections in the US. And she made her opinion clear, but she also was like, I don't know how much I should talk about this. Like, I have my own stance, but a lot of people who follow me are kids. So, do you think an audience plays a role in how much an influencer should talk on a subject? Like, if their audience is young, or if it's a very small versus a very big audience, or something like that? Do you think that ever plays a role?
I know some YouTuber and influencers will put their research, like this is the news I watch, and they don't really give their own opinions. They just show their audience like, okay, I watch this news, this is the research I do, so you can choose you can use this to pick up your own opinion and to have your own opinion. But I'm not going to tell you what is my opinion. You have to like do your research by yourself. I just share my materials with you. I think that is quite smart. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely think it does. I think when it comes to if you know you have a younger audience, I think then you really have to watch out with what you say, because children are a lot more gullible. Not only children and old people are a lot more gullible than people from our age and a little bit older. So I think if you know that you have people from those categories, you should really watch out with what you say, because I think you can do a lot of damage if you spread fake information. So yeah, I definitely think it plays a role. As for a bigger versus a smaller audience, I think if you have a smaller audience, you're probably already gonna have a lot of people who think the same way that the creator does, because usually the most loyal fans join in pretty early on, or it will be a more niche group. So I think in that regard, I wouldn't really mind with how much they share. The bigger it gets, I would also say just be a bit more careful.
Yeah, I think with like a smaller creator, the community is very much a community. Like they're just a small family, and already as a smaller creator, you probably share a lot more than a bigger creator does. Like you can share, hey, this is me in my bathroom, even like something kind of really personal, or hey, like my family dog died, and like have a real conversation with your community about it, versus like a big one. You don't get a lot of opportunity for back and forth, and there's a lot of bad actors in a bigger group. So I do think that with the smaller audience, you can probably share more, just because there's this understanding that you're in a, I don't want to say a relationship. I guess it'd be the trend word these days is a parasocial relationship, but it's still more reciprocal than like these bigger ones who you might look at as an authority because so many people follow them. That's really all of the questions I have. Thank you guys both for coming. I think that's pretty much it. I guess maybe we just say bye.
Yeah.
Bye.